Right. Um, when it comes to AI, geopolitics, and this combination, I would say 90% of it is written about the US and China. As a European myself, what are your expectations for Europe, and what role could it play the next decade when it comes to this, this intersection?
Yeah, I mean, the classic story is like America innovates and the Europe regulates, which is so far largely proven to be true in the AI space as well. So you've got the AI Act and you've got various other things sort of winding down the regulatory pathways. And, you've got all the innovation coming from America so far. Um, what's interesting, I think, is that there has been this real shift in thinking amongst European policymakers about digital sovereignty. What has been a sort of, a piece of rhetoric for the most part for the past decade or so, is now starting to get backed up by strategies, get backed up by a lot more money being put into it. And I think there's, open questions about whether or not the money's being spent in the best way or whatnot. But it shows, I think, a new intention to build a technological stack, which is at least somewhat separate from the American stack and the Chinese stack. Um, so I think, Europe could position itself eventually as a sort of third power, um, separate from the other two. But it's a really difficult pathway, and the sort of scale of innovation that's necessary, the scale of investment that's necessary to compete with China or to compete with the US is beyond what the EU can sort of institutionally offer. Um, it's a massive economy, of course, but institutionally limited because of the way it's all set up. Um, so yeah, I'm somewhat skeptical that, it can compete on the level of the other two. Very skeptical, but that doesn't mean that it's an sort of absent power. It can still be a very important player in all of this as well through various other means, and not just regulation as well.
Mhm. Okay, and as China maybe would or succeed more in the coming decades, do you think Europe will slowly shift a bit more towards the Chinese AI stack, or do you think it will remain largely dependent on the US AI stack as we currently see it?
I think it'll tie up with the Chinese stack quite a bit more. Um, I think particularly particularly under Trump and the ways in which the sort of regulations which have gone on, the US AI action plan and things like that, this effort to get rid of so-called woke AI, um, this sort of stuff has real impacts on what European companies can access, for instance. And so if the alternative is like, using Grok or using DeepSeek, um,
Hmm.
for most European companies, I think the answer is pretty clear. Uh, on top of that, you've also got various ways in which the EU economy is quite dependent, particularly German economy is quite dependent upon the Chinese economy. And there can be a sort of, negotiations going on which are sort of mutually beneficial to these two. Um, so yeah, I think it is likely that the EU will move closer to China while still pushing for its own digital sovereignty as well.